This is KM Weiland, and you are listening to the 295th episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I just got my upcoming historical/dieselpunk story storming back from my editor, Kathy Lynn Dyke. It's always a bit of a shock to me to be minding my own business, checking my email, when pow! I run across the email I've been waiting for all month, the notes on the edit. Even with a project that I'm as confident in as storming, there's always this blinding flash of panic. And then I gird my loins and open the email. And yay! She liked it. She approves. So, we're moving right along on schedule with Storming's publication. I've still got some final edits to do, and then it's on to publication. Right now, we're looking at an unofficial publication date this December. The latest post in the video series on my blog is Deadly Story Openers, How to Fix a Boring Characteristic Moment. It points out the important duties of a good characteristic moment in your book's first chapter, and how you can write one that both hooks readers and launches a great plot. To find the post, visit my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And now I hope you enjoy this week's podcast, entitled 3 Ways to Make Your Writing Easier. Writing is hard. If you're a writer, you do not need me to tell you that. In the unlikely event that you're not a writer, then all you have to do to be convinced that writing is hard is to take a quick sampling of writer humor. It's pretty much all self-deprecating, masochistic, laugh so you don't cry stuff. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I talk all the time about how more than half the joy of writing is found in its challenges. If it were easy, it would be boring, right? Well, yes and no. Because as much as we relish rising to the challenges writing offers us, I think most of us just plain love the idea of finding a way to make writing our novels easier. Most of us also have it figured out that there's no magic pill here. That's the bad news. The good news, there are at least 3 things you can do to make writing your novel easier. But first, let me share a little history on how I arrived at these ideas for making writing your novel easier. I've been writing since I was 12 and finished my first novel when I was 14. My journey as a writer looks something like this. First novel, in which I have no idea what I'm doing. Woohoo! This is so much fun! Second novel, in which I start to realize there's a few things I don't know. Okay, gotta make this book even better than the last one. This is a little bit harder. Third novel, in which I admit I don't have a clue what I'm doing. Yikes, this is so much harder. Fourth novel, in which I start learning there is actually a science to this writing stuff. This is murder. This is the hardest book I've ever written. This is the worst book I've ever written. Fifth novel, A Man Called Outlaw, in which I get a pretty good handle on all that stuff I learned during the previous book. This is fun. No, this is hard. No, wait, this is fun again. Sixth novel, Behold the Dawn, in which I'm starting to get it all figured out, and not coincidentally, when I perfect my outlining process, but am not quite sure I'm getting it figured out. This is amazing. How is this coming together like this? But wait, is it really coming together? Is it as good as I think it is? Commences self-doubt. Seventh novel, Dreamlander, in which I overthink everything I know and start by chucking my outline out the window, only to have to go outside and diligently pick up all the pieces. Please kill me now. Eighth novel, in which I think I know way more than I actually do. Wow, I am not such a genius after all. Ninth novel, Storming, which is coming this winter, in which I now understand story structure enough to purposefully apply it in the outlining phase. Wahoo! Easiest book ever! I am now the master. Commence victory dance. Writing will never be hard again. 10th novel, Wayfarer, my current work in progress, in which I rinse and repeat the process from the previous book. This is so... Wait, Wasn't this supposed to be easy? Now this is hard again. Why is this so hard? So, what are you supposed to glean from that whirlwind glimpse into my writing life? 1, writing is a process. It's a journey that goes both uphill and down. 2, every book is its own adventure. 3, experience helps you avoid mistakes that made previous books difficult. 4, but experience doesn't necessarily equal ease of writing. That last is what got me to thinking. Why was Storming so easy to write when Wayfarer isn't? The process is the same. My own knowledge has only grown in the interim. I am passionate about both stories. And with Wayfarer, I even have the added benefit of coming off a tremendously affirming and confidence-building experience with Storming. So what's the deal? In comparing the processes and the actual stories of Storming and Wayfarer, I came up with 3 important things you can do to make writing your novel easier. Number 1, think about it. By this I mean learn like crazy, and particularly about the mechanics of story as a whole. Learn story theory. Gobble up story structure and its relation to character arcs. The more you understand how to form a solid story, the easier the actual writing will be and the less you'll have to second guess yourself while in the throes of creation. Now, it's true that growth is a transformative, sometimes painful evolution. If you look at my writing history, you can see that some of my most difficult writing experiences have been those in which I've been in the midst of learning important new storytelling principles. But I've always reaped the benefits in the books to follow, by which time I've actually mastered what I was only just learning in the previous books. You want this stuff to become second nature, to the point that the right story decisions flow from you effortlessly. Effortless equals easy. Yeah, baby. Number 2, don't think about it. Now, really, how could this be a self-respecting writing podcast without a little bit of contradiction thrown in here? As much as we want to gain a conscious understanding of story mechanics and good writing, we also have to be able to set all that left brain stuff aside and let our creativity flow whenever we sit to actually write. Something I learned during the revision phase of Dreamlander, which was arguably the biggest period of writing growth I've experienced to date, was the crippling power of perfectionism. I was overthinking myself like crazy during the drafting process. I'd write a sentence, reread it, ponder it, rewrite it, write another. Agony. Then the deadlines started looming and I had no choice but to write like Barry Allen on crack. My fingers flew, the ideas poured out. I stopped overthinking myself and the whole thing became nearly effortless. As much as possible, do the heavy lifting of story planning ahead of time. Then, when the first drafts comes along, just write. Don't think, just flow. Thinking is hard, but flowing, easy peasy. Number 3, marry yourself to the right material. Now here's the kicker. This is the biggest lesson the contrast between Storming and Wayfarer taught me. Ready for this? Some stories are just easier to write than others. It's true, not every story is created equal. Storming was one of those special stories that set itself up in such a way to make usually hard aspects of writing easy. It came prepackaged with the perfect plot hook that also, wonder of wonders, worked as a great characteristic moment. Its backstory was positioned ideally to allow for just the right balance of setup and forward motion, and its protagonist jumped onto the page with a fantastically fun and engaging voice right from the first sentence. None of those things were due to my perfect planning skills in the outlining stage. None of those things were due to my knowledge of story structure and arc. That's just how the story worked out. They were gifts. Wayfarer didn't give me any of those things. Making Wayfarer work, especially in the beginning, was more of a challenge simply because of the demands of the story itself. If you want an easy writing experience, you're going to need to make sure you're choosing a story that supports that desire. If you can identify up front whether or not a certain story idea is going to set up its integral pieces in an effortless way, then you're pretty much guaranteed an awesome writing experience. But should you avoid the hard stories? My first reaction to the contrast between Storming and Wayfarer was to think, well, something must be wrong with this book. It should be just as easy as it was the last time. So, what did I do right with Storming that I'm doing wrong this time around? A little more thought, and I realized I'm not doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with a story that's challenging. Most stories are hard. It's the rare creation whose pieces come together effortlessly to the point that the story is almost writing itself. If you chuck out every other idea just because it seems like it might be hard to write, you're going to be missing out on a lot of great stories. For me, Behold the Dawn was easy to write, and Dreamlander was really, really hard. But you know what? I think they both turned out pretty darn good, and they were both extremely rewarding experiences for me as a writer. Storming was easy, and Wayfarer is hard. But I have no reason to think Wayfarer won't turn out to be just as good as Storming, and I can tell you right now that even though Wayfarer is not easy, it is still wildly rewarding. There's nothing wrong with making the effort to minimize some of the more agonizing parts of the writing process. But there's also no reason to run from the hard stories. Embrace them, learn from them, and then enjoy the easy stories for all they're worth when they actually come around. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.